So here's our lesson now for addition and subtraction using the significant figure rules that we take a look at. So again, we're going to be doing some math problems, and then we got to talk about how to round our answer to make sure that it has the right number of significant figures and is a precise way of using that number. Again, here's some notes for you guys to take a look at. I encourage you, again, pause the video. I'm going to talk through this, look at some examples that will do this, but pause it so you can write it down at your own pace and then come back to it when you're ready. So, for addition and subtraction, we're going to take a look at decimals. That's really the big thing. So when we want to take a look at addition and subtraction, our key thing that we're going to be taking a look at is its decimals. Just like our multiplication and division, we're going to be using the numbers that we're going to be doing the math with, the ones that we start with, in order to actually figure out how we're going to round our answer. So in this example, we want to have the lowest number of decimals based on what we started with. So let's take a look at our first example on how to do this. Step one was just like it was before. Hey, just do the math. Plug it into your calculator, figure out what it is, and just write it down. Everybody should be able to do that step, no problem. So I have 1,987.234 plus 12.0095. Plug that in the calculator. When I get this out here, I get 1,999.2435. Not that hard. The second step is to actually take a look at how many decimals I have in the numbers that I started with. Now the reason why we have to round to the lowest number of decimals is because we want to keep those values. Remember, those are measured values and they have a certain precision to them. Okay? We can't have our answer actually have more decimals than what we actually measured in the beginning. So we have to round to make sure that our answer has the lowest number of decimals that we started with. So when I take a look at this here, this is how I would recommend it. Just draw a line right along the decimals here. Again, you're not going to touch this side of the number. You're not worried about this side of the number. You're just worried about how many numbers are to the right of that decimal. So when I look at this here, I have 3 numbers to the right of this decimal here. So I have 3 numbers in this number that I'm working with. Again, draw a line. Look at how many are to the right of that decimal. And in this side here, I have 4 numbers to the right of this decimal here. So when I'm looking at my answer, I want to go to the lower of those 2 numbers. 3 is obviously less than 4, so I'm going to actually have to round my answer here so that it only has 3, and the big thing is, again, we're talking about the decimals, right? So this is all about decimals for this one. That's my concern. So now let's take a look at how I would round this out, okay? Again, I'm only worried about the decimal, so I'm drawing the line right here. I'm going to have 3 decimals, so that's what I want to have. I'm not worried about the left side. I'm only worried about the decimals when I'm doing addition and subtraction, because those are the measured precision values that we have. I'm going to look at the number to the right of the third one. It's a 5, so I'm going to have to round up. Again, rounding up, I think of this as becoming a 10, and I have to carry this one over. So now if I would actually round this up and keep the number going here, I would 1999.244 0. Okay? Now I said that I can only have 3 decimals, so I can only keep this 3 decimals, and that means that I get to drop off this 0 that I put at the end there. And this is actually showing that. Now remember, again, when we round, we want to make sure that the value that we end with, which is right here, is similar to the number that we started with, what we calculated, and that was up here. These values are very similar. All I really did was change the 3 and the 5, change the 3 to 4, and I dropped off the 5. Very similar value, very similar amount. So maintain the value of your number. Make sure you double check that with all your rounding problems. So we're keying on the number of decimals, and we want to make sure our answer has the lowest amount. Let's take a look at another example. Here's a subtraction one for you, right? Again, our first step, so step number 1 was do the math. So plug this into your calculator, right? I've already done the math for us. When I do 18.004 minus 6.3, I get 11.704. Done. Step number 2, we said, was to actually count, and remember, for addition and subtraction, we are looking for decimals. So I want to see how many decimals I have in my answers. Right? In this example here, I'm looking at the numbers to the right of the decimal place. I only have 3 here. And looking at the number on the right of the decimal place here, I have 1. That means when I'm rounding this, I can only have 1 decimal in my answer. So now my step 3 is actually rounding that based on what we had, how many decimals I can have. If I can only have one decimal, I got to look at the number to the right of that to round. It's a 0, so that means that this is just going to stay the same. I'm not going to change anything here, but I do need to change this one at the end to a 0. So right now I have 11.700. I can only have one of these decimals here, so I have to then choose to drop off these other zeros so that my answer only has one decimal, because that's the precision value that I've measured to. I've only measured a one decimal here. That means that my answer can only have one decimal. So my answer is 11.7 for this example here. Checking to make sure it's similar to what we started with. You bet it is. That's how we would round this. So there's two examples for you for addition and subtraction. If you're good, go ahead, try the practice problems and follow-up questions that are next in the lesson. Otherwise, stick around. I got one more example I can show you. So here's another one for you. Again, we're going to take a look at how we do this step by step. And remember, our first step is do the math. So I have 12.63 plus 120.0432. Okay, first step, do the math, plug it into a calculator. When you do that, you get 132.6732. Our second step is to count up the decimals. Again, when we're doing addition and subtraction, we're not worried about sig figs, we are worried about the decimals. So I'm looking at the numbers just to the right of the decimal place there. There's 2 in this one here, so I have 2 numbers to the right decimal place here. In this example, I have 4. I have to use the lower amount because that's my least precise measurement. So I got to use this here. I have to use only 2 decimals. So I've got to round my answer to have only 2 decimals. So let's take a look at that. That's my third step. Round it out so that it has the lowest number of decimals. So this answer can only have 2 decimals. Those are the 2 that I'm allowed to have. Again, I'm not worried about the left side. I'm only worried about the decimals for addition and subtraction. Look at the number just to the right. It's less than 5, so I'm going to be rounding this number down. I consider it to becoming a 0. And every number after that's also going to become a 0. So I'm left with 132.6700. If I can only have 2 decimal places, which is what I measured to, I have to drop off those other zeros so that my answer only has 2 decimals, because that's the lowest value that I can have. That's the example that you want to take a look at. That's addition and subtraction. Again, the big thing with addition and subtraction, you key on the decimals. Go ahead, try the follow-up questions. If you're struggling with this, make sure you ask for questions tomorrow in class. Get some help so you can make sure that you can do this on the upcoming test. Good luck.